So I would really like to welcome everybody to the call today. This is our second webinar for the EMR Network, Alberta, and we're super excited to have you. Next slide, please. Okay, and there might be a little bit of lag here. So, all right, so as per usual, when we do these kinds of webinars, we really love to know who's on the line with us. So please feel free to chat in your name, where you're from, and if you're in a room with several people, we'd like to know how many people are there with you. It just gives us an idea of how many people have attended the webinar. But also, when you put in your name, make a point to say what EMRs you use. That'll just give us an idea of you know, how many EMRs we have sort of on the line today. Okay, so I'll give everybody a minute to put that in. Excellent. Hi, Ariel. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Julie.
Hi, Ariel. Julie. Hi, Alma.
Welcome, everybody. Okay, so while people are putting that information in the chat, please keep putting it in. We want to hear from you all. Hey, Sue. Okay.
Yeah,
so
hi, Sue.
Can we
Brianna and Sandy.
Awesome. Can we go to the next slide, Barb? We still have a few people that are putting all that information in. So welcome, everybody. We love having you here. So just as a reminder, we've had a few people sign up to the network since we did our original launch. And so just as a reminder, we wanted to say that, that this network is going to be pretty awesome. It supports the advancement of the patient's medical home. The success of our EMR network is really grounded in all of you and your commitment to engage and communicate your collective experience and your wisdom and your passion to enhance the care of patients by optimizing the EMR. So we're going to be supporting a lot of different people in this network, including practice facilitators, EMR users in clinics and PCNs, and really any others that are interested in advancing their EMR leading practices and also advancing the medical home. Next slide, Barb. Welcome, everybody. I love everybody chatting in. So I am going to get started by introducing Barb right away. Just before I do that, I'm just going to let everybody know that we have a few people who are going to be helping us today. We have Leslie Bortolato, who is the co-lead for the EMR network and is also an improvement facilitator with Edmonton Southside PCN. She's going to be keeping an eye in the chat and looking for your questions. We also have Amanda Derriot, who is an LPN and a quality improvement lead with Wood Buffalo PCN. She's going to be talking to us a little bit later on in the slide deck. But we also have Barb McCaffrey, who is the AMA project lead for CPAR CII, and she's going to guide us through a whole lot of content today. And then last but not least, just to introduce myself, I am Mia Kavanaugh, and I am an AMA consultant as well, and also a co-lead for the EMR network. And I have just a little bit of a passion around EMRs. So I will transfer this over to Barb, and welcome, Barb. We're really excited to hear what you have to tell us. And just one last thing before you get started, we hope that you're going to have a whole ton of questions for Barb. And because she is such a fantastic resource for us at this moment, if you have questions, please put it in the chat, and we will make sure that we'll find a natural break in her presentation and ask those questions as we go. Okay, all right, Barb, welcome, all right. And we can't wait to hear from you.
Thanks, Mia, and I'm happy to be here. So today I'm going to give a really brief update on CII and CPAR, where we're at with the project. But really importantly, because this is an EMR network, wanted to share some of our lessons learned around EMR so far for PCNs, clinic team members that are in the process, interested in thinking about CII, CPAR, so that we can kind of get you advanced in this. And just a reminder that CII and CPAR are a joint project between the Alberta Medical Association, Alberta Health, and Alberta Health Services, and partnering with primary care networks to deploy across Alberta. So as we begin, there is a bit of a change in our information flow and landscape of information technology in Alberta. And we've created a really simplistic diagram to illustrate where things are at on this right now. So on the right-hand side, you can see Alberta Health Services. And until November 1st, Alberta Health Services had about 1,300 systems in Alberta. And over the next 3 years, they're migrating them to one system, which we all know is called Connect Care. And that's going to happen over the next year, 3 years. So Alberta Health Services is still going to be an entity, and it will run on a single solution called Connect Care, but there are other components. We wanted to remind people of that. So in the center, we have NetCare, and NetCare will remain as the electronic health record for Albertans. And it's a read-only system, but it collects information from multiple sources to create that record for Albertans. One of the biggest sources that's always been there has been Alberta Health Services, and that is where we collect lab information, diagnostic imaging. The record of dispensed medications comes into NetCare as well, and this forms a place where all care providers that are in a patient circle of care can get access to information. Over on the side, we have our community EMRs. We do have 5 EMRs that make up the majority of the space. About 85% of the EMRs in Alberta are made up by these 5 EMRs, and that's why these are the conformed EMRs to work with Community Information Integration Central Patient Attachment Registry. And we know today that these EMRs receive e-lab or e-delivery from labs and DI information, and the source of that information is Alberta Health Services. As well on the diagram, here we are adding in Community Information Integration, Central Patient Attachment Registry, and the Healthcare Data Repository. So these are newer components to our IMIT system, and there's two-way information flow between the community EMRs and CII. And information goes through the CII data space, and then it goes to the Central Patient Attachment Registry. And as we've been presenting about CII CPAR, information gets copied to the Healthcare Data Repository. This is new. It's governed by the Health Information Data Governance Committee. And the Healthcare Data Repository is basically a place to store health data. High-performing health systems, you might have heard of organizations like Kaiser Permanente, et cetera, have these so that they can do analytics for planning and quality improvement purposes. And that's the purpose of the Healthcare Data Repository. We also have a new feature that has been launched in one of the 5 EMRs, and it's been started in HealthQuest, and it's called e-notifications, and it's been really exciting because it enables community clinics to be notified when one of their CPAR paneled patients has a health event with Alberta Health Services. So if it's a hospital admission, discharge, ED visit, and some-day surgery, send a notice to the physician office in the EMR. They come in twice a day to tell them that that has happened. The other part on this diagram is My Health Record. And My Health was launched earlier this year in 2019, and that's a place where Albertans can have access to their own information. And if you haven't signed up, it's a good opportunity to do that, and that's where you can see some of your own lab information, your immunizations, and a copy of your dispensed medication. So this is a simple version of our health landscape, but it shows that these different components, NetCare, Connect Care, and EMRs, are all playing a key role and will continue to play a key role in patients' health information. So a bit of an update on where CII CPAR is. This is last week's data. There are 47 clinics live, and I expect later today when we get the deployment update, it's going to be over 50 across all 5 zones in Alberta, and those are both primary care and specialty clinics. On the right-hand side, you can see deployment in clinics associated with the PCN. So 5 clinics deployed in the North Zone, 9 Edmonton Zone, 4 Central, 6 in Calgary, and 3 in the South. So as a result of this deployment in these clinics across Alberta, what's been really exciting is that over 65,000 Albertans now have a new document that sits in their Netcare record called the Community Encounter Digest. This plays a really important role in sharing community information with others that might be looking in Netcare for more information about the patient, such as an emergency department physician. We also know that nearly 24,000 consult reports have been uploaded to Alberta Netcare since the beginning of this initiative, and it is also playing a key role in informational continuity of care for Albertans. And we've had reports from emergency doctors who are really excited to see these, knowing that a patient in emergency already might have a specialist that is managing a given condition, get more information about that. And we've had reports where they've contacted the specialist to arrange for follow-up where they've had a significant emergency department visit or hospitalization. The other thing I mentioned is that e-notifications are live, and this is exciting because as physicians requested this, this is something they've been wanting for a long time, to know when their paneled patients have had a hospital admission, discharge, ED visit, or some day surgeries. It arrives twice a day, 6 a.m., 2 p.m. into the EMR. And while it's live in HealthQuest, we expect Wolf to be live in the first quarter of 2020, and TELUS says MedAccess and then PS Suite will follow. And QHR, which is just getting ready to still launch with CII CPAR, will be available in 2020 as well. The exciting thing about e-notifications is the clinic receiving it, the primary provider and team gets the demographic information about the patient. They learn the date, time, and facility that it occurred, the reason for the visit, the attending provider, and any additional providers that might be notified if the patient is paneled to more than one primary provider in CPAR, and that's when an additional provider would be notified. Once the notice has been opened, it always does remain part of the patient's chart. This is the view in HealthQuest, but it will remain in the other EMRs as well, where lab reports are found. So e-notifications is a really exciting step and an important step for continuity of care in Alberta. So as well, I wanted to point out some things that are new or updated on our CII CPAR tools and resources page. The team toolkit has been, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Barb. I just want to back up. We do have one question. What happens if the primary provider has more than one location that he practices at? How will this show? Would it show under additional providers?
No. There's actually a bunch of parts to that question. So let's say a physician is participating in CPAR, but they have more than one location, and it depends on if the back end of those locations are really the same EMR or not. But let's say they're not. So let's say the physician practices in one clinic on MedAccess, and maybe they work part-time in another clinic that is using Wolf. If they have panels in both practices, they would actually register separate panels to CPAR. And it is possible that the patient could be paneled to the same provider in two different clinics on two different EMRs, although we haven't had that yet and nobody has come forward with that question, in which case they would see themselves as an additional provider notified, and they would recognize that's obviously themselves from their other clinic. Where we have multiple locations in a single instance of an EMR, and we already have clinics that are participating like that, that doesn't happen because the physician has one inbox and there's one record for the patient in the EMR. Does that answer the question, Leslie?
It seems to, yes. Thank you very much, Barb.
Okay. So moving along, just wanted to remind some people on the line what some new information is that's on the CII CPAR Tools and Resources webpage, and the URL is there. So we have an updated team toolkit that was updated this month. We have, with that, an associated clinic journey checklist that has been updated as well. The Wolf orientation presentation has been updated and posted, and just for your information, getting the MedAccess one ready right now. And there's also some new checklists that were prepared by the eHealth Support Services team to support the completion of the forms after the confirmation of participation form. And these are available on the website. Just a little bit of the highlighted information. Always the principle is the latest and most updated information is on the CII CPAR Tools and Resources page. As well, we work with the vendors, and the user guides are updated as needed. The Accuro guide has not been posted yet. Accuro wants to wait till we're working with the first clinics on launch, which we are, but we're waiting to launch them next month, and then the user guide will be posted. And another key resource that we want to mention this morning or today is the orientation presentations. These are a key resource that are very useful when informing a new clinic about the project, because it contains information that is specific to their EMR, and there's one for each of the 4 EMR products that is already implemented. I'll pause there. Any questions, Leslie?
Nothing so far. But I will ask one. So these orientation presentations are on the your main website then, and easily accessed by everyone.
That's right, and they're PowerPoint, so you can download them, and they're a hefty slide deck. Sometimes there's probably more slides than you would need given the time that you have with, let's say, a clinic team, but that's for the PCN or user to decide which ones they're going to use, and they might not use them all at the same time.
Okay, I do have another question, Barb. Is in the orientation presentations, is it mentioned that you need to have access to the IAM in order to register to log in?
So the slide presentations are more about the EMR processes. Now, IAM, I'll pause here. So IAM is Identity and Access Management, and it is a new feature that is available. And a simple way of explaining it is clinic managers for a long time have been using a manual process to give clinic team members access to NetCare. So now there's a new application in Alberta called IAM. You can actually get through the complete CPAR, CII registration without using IAM, but the eHealth team is encouraging clinics to adopt it as they go, because once a clinic has adopted it, then they not only have permissions to give permissions to new staff members as they come and go for NetCare, but it also allows the clinic access administrator to give permissions to access the CPAR application, because CPAR is a secure web application. It has its own permissions, but they can be given out through IAM. So it does make the process easier. IAM is not specifically covered in these presentations, but Alberta Health eHealth Support Services is working on some info sheets on IAM.
Okay. I do have a user who's saying that NetCare is calling the clinics and setting up seminars with the admins. Are you aware of that?
If it's about IAM, that is possible, but it also depends on where they are in the process. So once a clinic completes the confirmation of participation form, it is received by eHealth Support Services, and eHealth Support Services guides the clinic, working with usually the site liaison, which is often the clinic manager, and a PCN facilitator to guide them through the forms process to get them live on CII CPAR. And they would do the same thing with Identity and Access Management, IAM.
Okay. Okay, there was a clinic that could not get in without it, and it took quite a while before the problem was figured out, is what one person is saying. So,
yeah, well, it's out of my realm, but I've
right.
heard from the team at eHealth that it's actually Alberta Health Services who manages that. And so eHealth will try to work with AHS to get the permissions, the right permissions to the person. We've heard of stories where some people, like they never have an issue with logging in, and then other individuals do, and we cannot figure, they don't know exactly why some individuals have access issues.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will mention the application, I'll just finish, the application is controlled by HS.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is it possible you could share the link to the orientation presentation for our users? They
are on our tools and resources page. Here's the web link. Yep. Yeah, so everybody can find them on that page, act.alberta.doctors.org/CII-CPAR-/tools-resources.
Okay. Yeah, okay. She found them.
Okay.
Thank you very much again, Sue and Barb. Okay, I think we can continue on, Barb.
Okay, so now I'm going to shift, and I wanted to share today some lessons learned that we've had in working with clinics to get set up, and this is mainly around the EMR component with CII, CPAR, and I'm super excited that Amanda is going to share her experience through this as well at Wood Buffalo PCN. So the first part I wanted to mention is about the configuration and setup. So there's one-time activity that has to do in every clinic that has to do with configuration and setup. We've provided the detailed instructions in the EMR guides that are available for each of the EMRs. It involves setting things up at the clinic level as well as provider setup, and there might be some form configuration, and that's an example with Wolf. And then for clinics that are participating in CPAR, that means clinics with panels versus specialists or clinics without panels that are participating, they have the step of adding the panel numbers that they received during the registration process and their facility number in a very specific place in the EMR. So this is going off pretty much without a hitch, and it's a fairly simple process. Now, saying that, panel is really key, and that each clinic be able to know who their paneled patients are, and that is an important part for the next step, because if a clinic is participating in the CPAR part and expecting to upload a panel, it's been mostly pretty smooth, but that's why I wanted to make a recommendation today, is in each of the EMRs, there's a little bit of configuration about identifying which statuses are paneled, and that is completely described in the EMR guides. Another condition that must be met is that for a patient to upload to CPAR, they have had to have a last visit date, and there's also the date field where they have had verified, validated, or confirmed. So that checkbox has to be checked, or there must be a date in it, for example, in MedAccess. The other thing, there are some other conditions. Each patient has to be attached to a primary provider that is participating in CPAR. In HealthQuest, those patients have to have no end date reasons. In MedAccess, that patient status has to be paneled. In PS Suite, there's a button that was added for CPAR called Exclude from CPAR Panel, and that this is a double negative, but that box should not be checked. And in Wolf, the status is configured to be paneled, and in Acuro, it is configured to be active on panel. And then the last step is that the clinic should be generating a list before that first upload. They should know exactly how many patients are on that list and know that number. And that should be also something that a clinic should be reviewing monthly, that they know how many patients are on the panel. That way, when the panel administrator or the person playing that role logs into CPAR, they can make a comparison to what's in the EMR to the number that is in CPAR, and that's a really helpful process.
So Barb, this is Mia. I just have a question because we often in our paneling processes, we talk about inactive versus active, or we have all these statuses that we've used, but those are the ones that we really use pretty heavily. So when you say status is paneled, and I think Erin is asking the same question. Are we actually using, so are we saying that anybody we now have as active should be marked as paneled? Is that an actual little shift that needs to happen?
Yeah, no, so it's a new configuration step. So a new button exists in EMR that wasn't there before CPAR. And clinics probably don't even know it's there until they get to the CPAR configuration. And usually only somebody with EMR administrator privileges has the ability to see it. And whatever those statuses are that clinics have been using as their active patient, they're going to have to go into the configuration settings and mark them as what's called paneled. So the instructions are in the EMR guide. We haven't had any challenges with clinics doing that. It's actually, the step takes about 60 seconds to do. But it is a new step, and it's a new button that people probably haven't even noticed is there.
So is that something you would do like with a bulk change?
No, it's not a bulk change. So let's say a good example is in MedAccess, the most common status for active patients called active. You go into patient status maintenance, and only somebody with EMR administrator privileges can get behind there, and they see that. They'll see a new button, and it's a column called paneled, and they will check off the box for each status in the EMR that they consider going up to CPAR. So it makes a lot of sense, and I didn't want to do it 5 times today, but the instructions are all in the EMR guides, but it's a step that needs to be done. And our experience with that is there's been very little problem with it. It does take about 60 seconds to do. But the next step is actually the step that we haven't had 100% success with, and that is that the clinic run their panel list, knowing what their statuses are that are active and have that panel checklist, and run that list and know the number. And that second step is something that clinics probably should be doing. They should have been doing that all along.
Great. Thanks, Barb. I think everybody is like, whoo, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the next set of lessons that I wanted to share is around EMR data mapping, and this has to do with information that goes from very specific places in the EMR to this new document that sits in NetCare called the Community Encounter Digest. So we have this general information. So it was actually the Canadian Institute for Health Information that recommended to Alberta what fields should be collected, some which are going to inform the Community Encounter Digest. The rest all go to the Healthcare Data Repository. So that's where this list came from. It was recommended by CII. And so there's 3 types of data elements here. There's ones that are going to inform the Community Encounter Digest. You see those in green. The ones in blue go to CPAR. And the white ones and the green ones and the blue ones, all of them go in the background to the Healthcare Data Repository. And just a reminder, this is what the Community Encounter Digest looks like. And as I already said, there's about 65,000 Albertans that have these in their NetCare records, only 3.9 million to go. So what these show is if a patient ended up, and a good example is an emergency. Emergency would see, oh, this is where they're having encounters across the system from CII-enabled clinics. Oh, if somebody has diagnosed a new problem, which they're calling here a health concern history, it fills in that field. If somebody has a possible allergy that they found, it comes across. Measured observations, height, weight, blood pressure, waist circumference go. Immunizations pull if a clinic is doing immunizations, and if a clinic begins a referral process, the type of referral, for example, cardiology or urology, is recorded. And this is actually we're finding that there's a lot of value in recording this referral information because ER won't start another one if they know that a referral has been initiated, or a patient that's going to provider or provider across the system, they could see that another provider has initiated a referral for that patient. And honestly, to tell you the truth, when I look at this, I honestly think quite a bit about the Greg Price case. And if this technology had been available 10 years ago and providers contributing across the system, the value that it could create in a case like that. Something I do want to mention, if you have a moment, take a look at the detailed small print at the bottom of the Community Encounter Digest, and it's a disclosure statement. And it's very close to the disclosure statement that every user of NetCare sees when they sign on to NetCare on a daily basis. And that disclosure statement says that this information is as is, and that means that any user of that information, just like now the terms of use for NetCare, is every user clinician needs to validate the information before they would make a clinical decision. Okay. So I saw a question pop up, Leslie, about the referrals.
Yes, and there's also one more. It was just about that one clinic has none of the physicians have mentioned CII CPAR. And she wanted to make sure that there's information sessions that the doctors have been invited to in order to learn about CII. And I just responded that in Edmonton, I forgot to put in Edmonton, the AMA did have 2 sessions last week. One was an in-person session and one was a webinar. So do you know any more that would be coming, Barb, to give physicians more information about CII CPAR?
Yeah, and that varies. Yeah, it varies by PCN because we are working closely with the PCNs, and some PCNs have been very active in promoting and inviting providers to sessions. We can talk to Amanda about how they engaged with their provider practices as well when we come to Amanda. And some that we are providing at the AMA, but very much I think the most valuable presentations are the ones in partnership with PCNs. We have one coming up in January at Calgary Foothills. We've got Calgary West Central. We've got some coming up. But each PCN is taking their own tactic as well of reaching out to their providers in engaging with them about CII CPAR.
Okay. So regarding the referral information will only show when the actual referral mechanism is created in the EMR. And is that correct? And what if there is a referral form used?
Can you repeat the last phrase?
Sure.
That if there's a referral for?
If there is a referral form used.
Okay.
So the referral
I understand the question. So the referral process has to be initiated in the EMR, and if you right now go to download those orientation presentations for an EMR that you're familiar with, you'll see where it's pulling from. But if none of that documentation is made in the EMR, it has nothing to pull from. So that is the point I wanted to make here too on the next slide, is only the mapped fields submit. So that is why it's really important before beginning CII CPAR that any provider that is participating looks at that orientation presentation and or the guide written by the vendors, because it shows the mapping. And this is where a team, if they are not documenting in those fields, it won't pull. Now, the other point is if they want to keep something confidential, the first thing that a clinic should think about when they want to keep information confidential is, can it be recorded in an unmapped field? And on this diagram, you see the red circled field, and the screenshot comes from Wolf, shows where it is pulling from to inform the Community Encounter Digest. So the observations pull from those vital fields, and the assessment code pulls only from that box. And yes, it can pull multiple assessments on a single visit. but those text boxes that the blue arrows are pointing to on the right-hand side are not mapped. And that means that anything recorded in that remains at the clinic and does not send to NetCare. So that is one of the core concepts that every participant needs to understand. They need to know their EMR and what gets mapped, and then they need to know where they can record information if they want the information to remain confidential at the clinic. And another important concept, and this is a lesson that we learned, is that the visit has to be finished before the information will send. And there's a different word for this in each of the EMRs, but there are some EMRs, and an example is Wolf, where the clinic can function perfectly fine, and the providers have had a long time habit of not actually saving and closing a visit. But once they start CII, CPAR, nothing will go unless that door is closed, and that's the example from Wolf. So that has to be something that the clinic team also has to understand. And another example is in HealthQuest, the visit has to be done. So the staff at the front have to have the habit of marking a visit as done, or else no information will leave the clinic.
Okay. Barb, can you just explain, where does the health concern history come from?
Yes. So the mapping is in each of the EMR documents, and generally it's pulling from the problem field. So most EMRs call this the problem, and it only pulls newly documented problems once a clinic has gone live.
Okay. Another question, can patients see referrals in My Health as well?
No, that functionality has not been enabled, or it's not designed as far as I know. That's a good question, though. That would be ideal, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And there is one question here. What is valid appointment? And we know that that's...
Yes. So that actually comes from Accuro. That is terminology in their guide. I should have written that in brackets beside it. So it only applies to Accuro, and that the appointment has to be considered what's called valid. And they give more information in the user guide.
Okay. So, sorry, Barb, going back to referrals, if a physical form was faxed as per the specialist's requirement via the electronic form, how is it documented into the CED? Or is it?
It would not. So this is where, depending on the EMR that somebody's using, you're going to have to pull out the orientation presentation for that EMR and see where the referral comes from. And Leslie, because I know you know MedAccess really well, so when a task is created for a referral type, and maybe it's just written with cardiology, that task and that field cardiology is what would pull to that referral field.
Okay. So another question, Barb, is just to confirm information is pulled from the visit on the EMR, not the day sheet.
Right. So there are, and the one place, and this varies a little bit by EMR, is the patient reason for visit. And I'm going to just switch back to the CED. I know it's very small writing, but in that community encounter in the first box, the second from the right column is called the patient reason for encounter. For most of the EMRs, that pulls from the reason that is recorded in the scheduler. So it could say office visit, or it could say sore throat. And actually our clinical advisors say, that's okay, it says what it says, and clinics can use their existing workflow for that, with an exception I'm going to mention in a second. But the column on the right-hand side is the clinical assessment. So the patient reason for encounter could be office visit, but the clinician has put in diabetes or gout as their assessment code, that's the really important information that other clinicians will find valuable.
Okay. So the health concern will only show those things added to the problem list in the last year. It is not a complete list of the patient's active problems, correct?
It is not. As a matter of fact, there's a correction on that. So the Community Encounter Digest is a rolling snapshot, and it displays information that has been pulled into Netcare in the last year. And an exception is that one new thing has just gone to the steering committee, and the clinical advisory group is recommending that referrals pull for the last 3 years. So from go live day forward, it pulls from the clinic EMR, and that was a decision made by the clinical advisors that it was not going to pull past problems so that providers would not have to worry about past use of the problem field in the EMR. So, for example, once a clinic goes live and the next day they see a patient add a new problem, that problem goes, but if they had 5 problems diagnosed before that, that does not go. And it was really a decision about making it comfortable for providers who are participating, knowing that past use won't impact future use.
So do you suggest that doctors re-enter the problems in order for them to pull to the CED so it seems more current?
It's an option, and it could be provider and teamwork if they wanted to. But the whole point of the CED is really to display, and imagine a world 3 years from now when we have most clinics in Alberta participating, that it displays at a glance to somebody, let's say an emergency, the patient's visits across the system. Now, the next feature, which is on the list, we've talked about it a bit, is called a patient summary. And that would be the feature where a clinic would upload to Netcare a summary of the patient. And they would want to do this for their complex patients that might have multiple conditions. And that would be a source of information that would give the whole deep picture of a patient based on the provider and team that know that patient the best. So that is where CII CPAR intends to go, but that feature won't be worked on until e-notifications is done with all the EMRs.
So, Barb, I just want to be mindful of time because I know we still have Amanda to get to. And, oh, my God, these questions are awesome.
Yeah,
so
I know.
love that everybody's asking these questions, and we should try to find a way to maybe help answer them later on. I'm just wondering, Barb, you have a few more slides, and then we definitely want to hear from Amanda before we close out our webinar today.
Yes. I'll quickly go through 2 slides, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Amanda for a bit. Another concern that physicians have is how to keep information confidential. So if information has to be mapped or has to be entered into a field that's mapped to the Community Encounter Digest, there is ways in all the EMRs to make information confidential. We won't go into it deeply now. Information is both in the user guide for each EMR and some more tips in the orientation presentations. And thank you for reminding us, Mia, that we do have to move on. So I'm going to pass the baton to Amanda for a bit to talk about her experience in Wood Buffalo PCN. They have 4 clinics. For a very small PCN, they've got 4 clinics on CII CPAR, and I'm really excited that she's going to share her experience.
Thanks, Barb. So hi, again, my name is Amanda, and I do work with the Wood Buffalo PCN. And we do have our 4 clinics live on CII. 2 of our clinics actually just went live on CPAR yesterday, so we don't have the conflict or the mismatch reports as of yet, but we are looking forward to receiving those. So just to kind of talk about the process that we took to get started. We did provide the training to our clinic staff, which is our multidisciplinary team, which consists of nurses, both LPN and RN, our dietitians, our pharmacists, our mental health therapists, as well as our after-hours clinic physicians. We did have our 2 clinics, our central location and our after-hours clinic, go live a week apart. So we did have to engage all of our physicians. So I did set up meetings with them to get them engaged and explain what CII was and what information would be shared with NetCare. The physicians, I didn't have any feedback with any concerns from the physicians with what information would be shared. So we did go through the EMR guides just to show them, especially for Wolf specifically, because that is the EMR that we use within our clinic, just to show which information would go. And I guess some lessons that we learned about the information once we did go live was, I guess, in respect to the primary provider being updated for those clinics, specifically having our multidisciplinary team and those physicians that were agreed to participate, that they were updated within the EMR, because we did have some errors come back for those encounters that didn't go in respect to that. Sorry, and working with the clinic, I guess, we did engage the team to identify any potential issues with any processes that were currently being used that could create issues with our data flow. For example, entering data into the assessment field, we didn't want to have the clinicians enter those ICD-9 or ICD-10 codes if the physician hasn't actually diagnosed. So we have moved those assessment codes down into the free text box to ensure that that information isn't going to NetCare and not being accurate. So, for example, we were using those assessment fields to track our DNPC patients. So we had to move that out of that section and drop it into the free text so that we could still pull the data to identify our DNPC patients, but not have it as a diagnosis go to NetCare. And I guess
asking if, sorry, Amanda.
Go ahead.
Someone is asking what DNPC is.
Sorry, so that's our diabetic nephropathy clinic that we run within our PCN. So it's just a way for us to identify those specialty patients.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Amanda. I wanted to ask you a question, too, in terms of the first 2 clinics that your PCN did first were your PCN-managed clinics. What advice would you give to others and other PCNs of why enabling your PCN-managed clinic was a good strategy to go with first?
That's a good question, Barb. So actually, we wanted to have our 2 PCN clinics go live first so that we could identify any issues or concerns that we had on our level so that we could share those learnings with other clinic managers and with any physicians, especially for some physicians who would present with some concerns. We wanted to be able to have those answers ahead of time and just being able to I guess, find whatever process changes we might need to have. That way we could provide those learnings to the other clinics as well.
And I think that's a great strategy as well.
Yeah, so for example, when we were reviewing, once we went live, our community encounter digest, we did have some errors that came back. So again, with that primary service provider not being updated, so we did have to change our process for both clinics to ensure that it was somebody who had agreed to participate in CII. For the physician clinics, the primary service provider actually will default to the physician within the clinic. However, we are able to take that learning to the clinic if they have a locum come in that we ensure that the primary service provider is actually the family physician within the clinic, so that encounter will still go. So for us, that was a learning curve for ourselves. We also noted for our multidisciplinary team, the skill code wasn't configured within within the EMR. So we did have some of our clinicians, for example, our exercise specialist, she didn't have a skill code created to identify her role within the clinic. So I worked with eHealth and with Wolf to ensure that a skill code was actually created for her. So now she is identified on the Community Encounter Digest as an exercise specialist within the clinic.
Thanks, Amanda. And I want to mention as well that Wood Buffalo is one of several PCN-managed clinics that is enabled in Alberta. And provider types that can participate in addition to physicians are those other allied health professionals in PCN-managed clinics, and they are contributing to the encounter information for those patients in that care. And another type of example is a low-risk maternity clinic in a PCN that is seeing maternity patients. Their visits and observations like height, weight, blood pressure, which is quite important for a maternity patient, is informing their Community Encounter Digest in that care. So thanks, Amanda. I'm going to get back to you in a second, and I know, Mia, that we're just probably running out of time today. So I will, I'm just going to bring, this is the Community Encounter Digest. So one of our lessons learned, and I want to segue back to Amanda on this, is once a clinic goes live, they need to view their own Community Encounter Digest, or the Community Encounter Digest for their own patients in that care, to get feedback on how the data entry occurs at the clinic and how it appears in NetCare. And that was one of the lessons learned that Amanda shared as well, is they noticed that their provider types weren't transferring across, and they wanted to make sure that they were accurately representing who they saw in the clinic. Any other lessons learned here, Amanda, after go live and working with your practice team?
Yeah, so we did have a couple errors come back. One in relation to in respect to the birth dates. Sometimes the birth date isn't entered correctly, so it might be month, day, year instead of day, month, year. So we did have to ensure that the information is being updated correctly. Otherwise, the information won't flow. We also had some errors come back if the patient name, for example, was William Smith. If they didn't enter it as William Smith and put Bill, if that was his chosen or preferred name, that also bounced back. So just ensuring that those processes are streamlined within the clinic. We did do spot checks regularly through NetCare, and I did work closely with the clinics to do that, as well as eHealth to track those errors so that we could actually identify where or what the issue was for the information not flowing. We also had, for one clinic that did go live, the enable encounter plus the chart summary actually didn't get checked off before they went live, so only part of the day actually flowed to NetCare because we did identify the issue. So making sure that you do follow those Wolf EMR guides to ensure that each appropriate box is checked off so that the information can flow. And one other thing, I just wanted to kind of go back just a little about the problem list, because we did notice also from that the problem list didn't go if it wasn't, again, within the last year or after go live date. So our clinicians from our central location have been going in when they see their patients and making sure that problem list is up to date and resubmitted so that it will flow into the health history concern.
Great. Thanks, Amanda, and congratulations again on your high implementation in Wood Buffalo PCN. So I know we have to transfer back to Lori and Mia. Just a reminder, check out our website. That's where the most up-to-date tools and information are. And Mia, I think we might have used up our time for questions, have we?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm really impressed with all the questions that came through in the chat. I know Lori is in the background logging some of the extra questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, and we're going to make sure that they get on the discussion board. So really make a point to go back to the Collaborate page and look up some of those answers that you may have asked questions on. So thank you so much, Barb, for joining us today. We are super lucky to have you. You are quite a wealth of knowledge, and I think this really gives gives everyone a lot more information that they can digest and great reminders of where we can find resources. So don't forget that the presentation is going to be posted on the Collaborate page, so you can refer to these slides and links and resources that Barb talked about today. So before we wrap up, we just have a couple more minutes to go. I have Lori Toma on the line here, who is our Networks of Practice portfolio lead at AMA, and she's just going to tell us about a couple things, a couple of other really great reminders.
Great, thanks so much, Mia. First, I wanted to open up this opportunity for IHI Open School. I know that it's been well advertised through the Practice Facilitator Network, but I know we have people on this call who are beyond, who aren't just practice facilitators, who are doing other roles or might not be part of that network. So I wanted to just let you know that there is this opportunity for you to sign up for IHI Open School, which is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. It is an international organization that's based out of the U.S., and they offer a number of online courses, most of them focused in on patient safety and quality improvement. But we did buy a limited number of licenses through the AMA, and our one-year license is expiring on January 31st, and there's still a handful of them up for grabs. So I wanted to extend the invite out to this group, and I'll get that posting for the link. I didn't put it here in the email, but I'll pop that onto the discussion board for anybody who wants to take advantage of that. Next slide, please, Barb. Secondly, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up if you hadn't heard. We do have a new Patients Medical Home podcast that's being produced through the Alberta Medical Association, and you can go to your favorite podcast player to access it. Next slide, please. We have about 10 episodes. We do have 10 episodes that are available right now, so there's a quick glance, but you can get all of them from your favorite podcast player. We do have a CII CPAR one planned to record early in 2020, and I think we'll also be sometime after that getting one on the general informatics landscape in Alberta. So if you haven't had the opportunity, please go check it out. There's some amazing stories there from Alberta family physicians for you. So back to you, Mia. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Next slide, Barb. Thank you. So just a reminder for anybody who is new to the network who just recently signed up after our launch in October, to remember to go get your login for the Collaborate website. I'm going to post the last page here in a second that you can go that has all the links for it. So it's just a reminder of all the things that we have up there. We really want to make good use of our discussion board. So any of these questions you think of later, throw it up on the board, either on the main discussion board, or it might be a question that pertains specifically to your EMR. So one last thing just about all these groups is that I wanted to give a quick shout out and a thank you to everybody who completed the survey that was sent out to your inboxes. We really appreciate your time in completing that. And we're really busy looking at all your responses, and we'll be using that to help inform the launch of the user groups. Next slide, Barb. So this is just a very quick reminder about how to get notifications into your inbox. So I actually set mine up yesterday, and if you are signed up to, let's say, the Acuro and the Wolf group, then you can set a notification that anytime somebody posts something to the discussion board, it pops into your inbox. But you'll see at the bottom, you can set your preferences. So for example, once you click that, link that's in red there, down below, you can set your preferences. So you can only get things when new things are added or when existing items are modified, so you can choose how often you get notifications. And you can also get notifications that send them to you as soon as they get posted, or you can get a once-a-week summary. So those are really helpful in just managing how much your inbox gets bombed with things. And next slide, Barb. So we just want a reminder about the upcoming webinars in the new year. So March 11th is our next one. That one's going to be around opioids. And so we're going to have lots of information to share on that one. Of course, we jam-pack everything in these webinars with as much information as possible. When you signed up to the network, you receive invites in your calendar, so keep an eye out for those. All right, last slide, Barb. So if you have somebody who, you think this might be, that this was really helpful for, you have other people in your PCN or in your own clinic that you think some of this information would be super helpful, then please let them know how to sign up to the network. This is all the information about how you can sign up. I just wanted to say thanks to Barb and Amanda and Leslie for joining us today. Also, Lori and Leanne, who's in the background, always making sure our technology is working. So thank you to all of you who have joined us as well, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Mia.
Thanks.